Well, I wanted to wrap out this conversation about the gin and tonic with maybe a slightly more general conversation about gin, because that's something that you and I have had the opportunity to bond on a number of times. And I've had the opportunity to even work with some distillers here in the US formulating some gins, and I've seen the trends going in certain directions. I've had the chance to talk to people about, where they think gin is heading, but I don't know that you and I have had the conversation of, like I mentioned earlier, is juniper still in retrograde? What is the governing identity of the craft gin space right now? I don't know that I have a very good pulse on it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on where you're talking about. So like what things are going on in the US versus what's going on in the rest of the world I mean, there's a whole load of reasons for it, but there's some fantastic gins in the US, and in many ways, American gin was far in advance of what other people were doing. When you think about in the 90s when Junipero came out, and you think about things like 209 and Guy Rehorse, these fantastic gins that were the first gins to not necessarily be truly classic, but they were, slightly doing things in their own kind of way. And the US was way ahead with that. But then when you kind of look at how many US gins are in all of the states or something like that, or what are the gins that sell really well in the US and stuff, there's just, I don't know, the traction. I mean, you've got a lot of great booze in the US, so I guess maybe that's it. It's the competition from everything else. But, I just kind of feel like where the gin market was now and where it was 10 years ago in the US, I think there has been some movement, but not as much as I've seen elsewhere. Whereas other places I see, it's truly exploded. So, South America going, it's just superb gins coming from out there, and lots of different ones, and gin is really becoming more and more popular. So I think Brazil is, that is really growing. They like the Spanish-Style Gin and Tonic in Brazil as well. Asia, I'm starting to see a lot more, some very good gins coming out of China, but also India. India's doing some really great stuff. And then Australia is just a powerhouse, right? Australian gin, and I know you can get Four Pillars in, Four Pillars probably available in more states than some really great US gins, I would guess. I mean, they do a great job, but and you see stuff like Four Pillars, and they're doing a fantastic job with their spirits and their range. But there's hundreds of distilleries in Australia, all doing interesting things, interesting botanicals to play with. You've got this ability for people to taste plants and flavors that, unless they travelled there, they probably never would get to taste. But now, finger limes or something like. Although to be fair, I did actually have finger limes in San Francisco because they weren't great. But nevertheless, things like finger limes and lemon myrtle and all these kind of weird botanicals that are just local to a particular place, which unless you go there, you probably won't get to try. You now can try and travel through the medium of gin. So I think the internationalization of gin is the big thing, and that is good in two ways, because it means that as consumers in the countries that we're in, we're getting more choice, and then also for our producers, there's other markets where people can export to. So Brazil's a big market for gin. Okay, so they're going to want to drink some of their local gin, but hey, maybe they want to drink a gin from California, maybe they want to drink a gin from Texas or DC or New York or wherever,
Yeah, that's a great point. And it kind of makes me think of the notion of, as opposed to a time capsule where you can open something up and feel transported to another time, gin, in the way that you just described, is almost like a place capsule. It's where you can bottle it up, ship it off somewhere, and have that sense of transport. And I think, to me, that's what a great cocktail, or even if it's just a straight pour of something, that's what a great experience is to me. It evokes that sense of place, or that sense that you are wherever you are drinking it is all right. Well, I'm not just here anymore. I'm smelling the, you know, the peat of Isla, or, you know, what have you. And so I think botanicals are a great tool for that. And it reminds me of something that we just reviewed recently, which was a gin from Mississippi, Wonderbird gin.
Ah, yes.
And I believe you had a hand in that, right?
Yes. Good job you reminded me. I think they were very generous with what they said on the website. But they were someone that came to one of my classes. It was in Portland, so it would have been, I think we had Todd there, but we also had the great Lauren Patz. She would have been one of our instructors at the same time. Yeah, so I mean, we talked, you know, these classes, we talked to people about, you know, what their kind of ideas are, but I mean, if I gave them some help, then fantastic. And the gin is brilliant. I've tried it and it's fantastic. And I'm very happy, and any help I can be, I will, but I can't really take any credit for anything, I'm afraid. But they did a great job. And rice is not easy to work with. A rice-based gin, not easy to do. It was done before. There was one done like 10 years ago, and it just wasn't a very clean base. But those guys have done a fantastic job.
Right. Well, and so this is, I didn't have this on my list of questions for you, but it does occur to me that I've been meaning to ask you about this. What do you think, and I know that this is a little bit backwards in terms of the actual logic, maybe it doesn't make any sense at all, but do you ever think about distillate base as a gin botanical?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And that's actually kind of one of the fun things about US gin, is that there's a lot more people making their own base spirit because they want to make their vodka, or they want to make whiskey or something like that. Whereas in the UK and in Europe, it's a lot less common. Most people are buying in the neutral spirit. One is not better than the other, but obviously there's things that you can kind of play with. There's some very minor technical, well, they're not minor if you want to obey the law, but there are some technical issues about why it's actually slightly easier to make a base spirit in the US as opposed to in Europe. You don't have to distill it to quite as high. But yeah, the other way that you can do that is either you can have it as your base, or what you can do is you can use the neutral base and then maybe add a bit of distillate post distillation. You can't call it London Dry Gin in that case, because you've added something afterwards. But you could do that, because for most gins, you have to distill it to quite a high ABV, make it basically very, very pure, a bit like vodka, to make the base. And if you do that, you'll strip out a lot of character. So, you know, that's part of the reason why like whiskies and brandies and things are so great and so flavoursome, is that they're not distilled to a really high ABV, so a lot of the character that would otherwise be stripped out remains. So if you made a beautiful cherry eau de vie or something, you might just add a splash in your gin afterwards, and that would be what you would do. I mean, the guys in Mississippi, that's their base spirit, and they do a very good job of it. I imagine. Yeah, just can't quite imagine having to deal with all that rice to do the fermentation stuff. Must get quite messy.
Yes, I'm sure it does. It's probably just beneath rye in terms of messiest things to work with.
Yes, yeah, I can imagine.